area.
In other news, the National Power Training Institute of Nigeria, NAPTIN, has joined the League of Professional Trainers in Africa following the assessment of its application by the African Network Centers of Excellence in Electricity. This places the institute in a vintage position to attract foreign direct investment through training patronage from other African countries at the instance of the Association of Power Utilities in Africa, APUA. APUA will in the long run enable the upgrade of facilities and increase the quality of training in line with international best practices. NAPTIN, which is the only representative of the African Network of Centers Excellence in Electricity in West Africa and one of the 8 training centers of the network in Africa, has started reaping some benefits, as it has been requested by the Association of Power Utility of Africa to design selected training programs for the utility companies in Ghana. Finally, the equities market closed on a positive note on Tuesday as the Nigerian Stock Exchange All-Share Index appreciated by 2.43% to close at 36,720.62 basis points after a previously recorded loss. Next is a graphic summary of how the market fared on Wednesday. Business News. Good Morning Nigeria continues. I am Amina Nujain.
Thank you very much, Amina Nujain. Up next is the newspaper review from Good Morning Nigeria.
Bayo Toyobi, our newspaper reviewer, is right here with us today for our review session. Bayo, good morning and welcome to the program.
Thank you. Kinsley, good morning. Good morning, Blessing.
Good morning, Bayo.
Good morning, Nigeria.
Another potentially lazy morning because of,
yes.
of the weather. All right, so let's enjoy it while it lasts, because during the heat, everybody will be complaining. So, Bayo, let's begin by taking a look at the front page of the papers that we have this morning. Blueprint is our first newspaper. Blueprint is quite busy with its front page stories. That's in terms of the headlines that are indicated, and the stories, of course, are found in greater detail inside. Hepatitis E on increase in Boko Haram ravaged Borno. That's according to the NCDC, that's the Center for Disease Control. How to end poverty and illiteracy in the north. That's attributed to the Sultan, Onayekon, and others. And also there on the front page, gunmen kill 73-year-old pensioner in Ekiti. That's on page 15. Boko Haram. That's the kicker. No time to rest yet. Prioritize troops. Details of that story can be found on page 17. Now the lead story says with a kicker, 30 trillion naira revenue. Senate threatens Adenuga and British American tobacco. That's on page 6 in greater detail. Now, below the photograph on the front page, 1.2 million jostled for well over 1,000 immigration jobs. 1.2 million jostled for over 1,000 immigration jobs. Details can be found on page 6. And Calabar Channel. Niger Global gets $12.5 million for undone job. Got $12.5 million for undone job. Again, that's attributed to the Nigerian Post Authority, NPA. Details can be found on page 34. Blessing.
All right, from the New Telegraph, we have this stories. Below the nameplate, we have, I sold my son for 150,000 naira to eat. This is coming from a father. You find the story on page 8. Kogi Assembly attack, plot to impeach Speaker, thickens. And that story is on page 10. And Lagos takeover of National Stadium hits the rocks. That story is trending on page 37. And for IMF, it's saying Nigeria's growth rate can't reduce poverty. That story you find on page 6. But just above the nameplate for the New Telegraph is a story, trapped funds. Federal government releases $425 million to foreign airlines with a rider, aviation to contribute $8.2 billion to GDP. Leading for the New Telegraph this morning is Graft War. AGF, that's the Attorney General of Federation, Magu, head for showdown. Minister accuses EFCC chair of breach. And there are two riders. Face Off endangers anti-corruption. This is coming from Senior Advocate of Nigerians. And also, Sergei Zekome Ali, Raji Akintola Showemimo speak on Rift. The photograph you have there is that of a student of a particular school protesting extortion and block Enugu Onitsha Expressway. All the details you'll find on the side page of the paper. Hate speech, invitation to genocide. This is coming from Acting President Yemi Osinbajo. With the rider, go on, no nation survives multiple wars. And DSS will deal with troublemakers. All the details trending on page 3. Bayo.
Yes, the youths in our nation have been enjoined to eschew hate speech because by so doing, they will be hitting off the polity. This was at a seminar that was organized at the National Institute for Security yesterday. The acting president addressed the issues critically and said the nation is confounded by what he described as certain false narratives. And people use these narratives to cause disaffection among one another. Among them are the fact that Nigeria is merely a geographical expression and people did not sit down to agree on it. He cited the instance of Italy in his historical context that was predicted to go under but is still surviving up to today. He also cited several instances that even complaints of marginalization are oftentimes or a personal agenda of individuals who feel maybe they have not gotten what they want, and therefore they tend to resort to primordial sentiments, that of religion, that of region, and that of ethnic groups. And therefore, he advised seriously against all this. But he said categorically, the best way to address all this is that government must meet its primary responsibility, that of providing security for lives and property, and also the critical one, ensuring that poverty is eliminated. How? By providing jobs for the teeming youths, not what he described as just poverty alleviation, but critical involvement of the youths in practical terms so that they can get their hands engaged as provided for the end power.
He also
General
talked
Gowon
about
was the
this issue of
chairman.
respect,
Yes,
to respect for
Gowon
one
was
another.
the chairman, and he also categorically pleaded with the youth, please, no nation has survived 2 wars. The other issue is Kogi State. The Speaker of Kogi State House of Assembly has closed down the house indefinitely. He did that under the powers accorded him under the rules of the house. However, there have been accusations and counter-accusations about involvement in the fracas, hoodlums that attacked the Kogi State House of Assembly. In fact, the police has come out to deny that it is not involved. They are accusing fingers being pointed at some members of the legislature, some at the governor of the state. And meanwhile, it is alleged that there are plots, in fact, to impeach the Speaker of the Kogi State House of Assembly.
All right, that's continue. That's a story that will still be on the front burner for a while. That's Kogi, of course, plus the Dine Melaye recall that is also still on the cards. Now let's come to This Day newspaper and take a look at the stories on the front page of This Day newspaper. Bayo already discussed that. Above the nameplate says you are appointment seekers. Osinbajo tells protesters of marginalization. And then high profits boost foreign refineries scramble for Nigerian crude. That's on page 8 in greater detail. Now the lead story is on the economy with a kicker IMF. Nigeria's economy remains challenging despite signs of recovery, with a rider calls for coherent policies to enhance recovery. Now, energy-starved Nigeria, that's the other story there on the front page of This Day. Energy-starved Nigeria plans to extend gas supply to Côte d'Ivoire as electricity to grid drops to just about 2,900 megawatts, and manufacturers spent 66.99, that's 67 billion naira on generators. Manufacturers spent 67 billion naira on generators, and CBN moves closer to single exchange rate. That's on page 46. Listen.
Okay, the story about Nigeria's growth with IMF reports. It's at the foot of the page for Daily Trust. Let's take a look at some of those stories starting from at the foot of the page. Nigeria's growth insufficient to cut unemployment and poverty. This is credited to IMF. Just beside that story, you have on pages 29 as well as page 3, mother, daughter, kill grandchild. That's a report from the police. Find out more details on page 29. 2019, Institute to engage political actors. That story is trending on page 3. The photograph you have there, moving up, is just like I read in the New Telegraph. A student of this particular college, Waforizu, blocking the Enugu-Onitsha Expressway during a protest yesterday. Leading for the Daily Trust, Oshimbajo, we already touched on that, why we must end hate speech. Starts right there, but continues on page 5. But Bayo Kingsley, this is worrisome for me, and I'm sure for everyone who's watching this morning. Teacher shortage has hit crisis points. That's coming from the council. Well, we find out more details, page 3. Then just entered there, you have the story, Acting President, APC Chairman discourse Buhari's health, trending on page 3.
All right, let's take the Daily Independent now. Daily Independent is our next paper. Above the name flag of Daily Independent, NIWA, that's the Inland Waterways Authority, to dredgers. Don't obey Lagos government ultimatum. Now, don't obey Lagos government ultimatum. That's coming from NIWA to dredgers. Details can be found on the front page with a jump to page A4. Now, there's a headline just below the name flag of Independent. It says, Niger Bet opens betting on when Buhari will return. Details of that story can be found on page A14. Lead story says, Court sacks Akwa Ibom local government chairman and declares appointments illegal. Now, also there on the front page, federal government declares state of emergency in science and technology and announces more tax holidays for pioneer firms. Below that is another story. PDP won't cut corners again, says McCarthy, and former governors Ladoja and Akala return to party. And rise in non-performing loans may impede recovery. That's according to the IMF, and says the economy remains challenging despite signs of relief. And lastly, from the front page of Independent, reconstruction of Oshodi Airport Road begins next month. That's on page A9 of Independent. Bio.
Yes, the concern is about the dread of teachers. This has been raised, and if you recall, a factor of the Empower program is specifically directed at recruiting teachers, particularly graduates, under the teaching scheme so that they will boost the population of teachers. However, it's ironical that the Nigerian Union of Teachers that are raising this alarm now protested against that program, that not everybody who is a graduate can just walk into the classroom and begin to teach. And so I think the best approach would be like we used to have it several years back. There used to be the pivotal teachers program. And there was this crash program that was undertaken to increase the population of teachers, particularly when the UPE program was declared without making plans for adequate teachers. So this pivotal program went a long way to providing teachers to meet the classroom demand. The other encouraging news is about the economy. A financial institution, Bloomberg, has identified that the import-export window opened by the central bank has succeeded in gradually converging the foreign exchange rate. And currently, as of Monday, the exchange rate at the BDC, the parallel market, at the interbank were all converging to about 360, 362.
That's right. You're right, Bayo. That's the wild differences that we used to see in the rates. Those differences have gradually, disappeared. But of course, this is still, an indication that there's a lot more to be managed in terms of.
Quickly, Bayo, there was a story about a man selling his son for 150,000 naira to eat. How sad could that be?
Yes, poverty. You will recall, not just about 2 months ago, there was a man who went to the market pretending to be buying a rice with his son. And when he was giving the rice, he left his son behind and departed. There are desperate situations, people out of hunger, out of desperation.
My question is, where's the mother of this child?
Yes. Most instances, where you have such instances, it happens mostly in separated families, where the father and the mother are not together.
All right, Bayo, yeah, it's pretty sad. But I think that, there's some potential conflict in Lagos on account of control over the inland waterways. Of course, there's a court decision, a court of appeal decision, but of course the Lagos state government, exercising its own influence and authority over aspects of that. It has to do with dredging, because Lagos, has come under the assault, as it were, of illegal dredgers. And part of the flooding that we saw in Lagos was attributed to illegal dredging activities. Now,
Drainages and canals are blocked.
Are also blocked, but of course they are also clearing. They're seeking to clear up those canals now. But dredging has been a major menace in parts of Lagos.
Talking about Lagos,
we must go now.
A few days after the students were released, the local government chairman has also been kidnapped.
Yes, unfortunately. Yeah. All right, Bayo, that's the much that we can take with you on the review segment. Thank you for being here. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you. Tomorrow will be another day.
All right, it's Good Morning Nigeria, the network service of the NTA. We'll take a short break now. When we return, of course, we'll be looking at the resurgence, apparent resurgence of Boko Haram in the northeast.
Chief. Good morning, sir. You're here already?
No. Now my spirit day here. My body day for house. What kind of question is that? Were you not the one that fixed this meeting for 8 a.m.? You are now coming by 10 a.m. and start asking me jab questions.
But Chief, now, I'm sorry. Don't you also go late for meetings sometimes? You know now, African time thing.
No more African time. And no more pancaking of face during office hours. At the end of the day, we will lose valuable time. We will not make progress. If we want to move this nation forward, we must treat business as business and respect time. Change begins with me.
Thank you, sir. I'm sorry. Can we go for the meeting now, Chief?
Later.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
All right, you're welcome back, and of course, to kickstart our discussion on the developments, on several developments in the Northeast after the several successes recorded by the military, we'll take this background report put together by our correspondent Timothy Yusuf.
A statistical breakdown on the activities of insurgents in the Northeast reveals that 336 soldiers, 5,929 Boko Haram members, and 7,136 civilians have been killed so far between 2009 and 2016 alone. The conflict has left at least 20,000 dead, with more than 2.6 million homeless since 2009. Boko Haram's attacks in the last few months have, however, been on the increase. Just last week, a suicide bomber killed 14 people in northeast Nigeria after detonating explosives in Dikwa on the fateful Friday night. Investigation reveals that the building housed people who had previously fled the rebellion by Boko Haram and since returned. According to the Borno State Emergency Management Agency, the number of people killed in Maiduguri since June till now are not fewer than 113. While it is on record that Boko Haram insurgents had carried out about separate 90 or multiple suicide attacks in and around Maiduguri, in the last few months, insurgents have also been attacking more and more military outposts and their convoys. Experts are of the belief that the increasing spate of attacks by insurgents may likely continue as a result of their being reportedly pushed out of their main strongholds in Sambisa forest by Nigeria security forces, more so that the group will attempt to demonstrate its capability and strength in refuting defeat. Just this Tuesday, it was reported that Boko Haram insurgents killed no fewer than 7 people in Adamawa State, northeast Nigeria. The attack took place in Mildo community, Madagali local government area of the state. This attack came days after the insurgents ambushed some Nigerian oil explorers in the Lake Chad region, killing over 40 people. 3 of the explorers from the University of Maiduguri are said to still be in captivity of the terrorists. Worried by this development, Acting President Yemi Oshibajo last week ordered the relocation of service chiefs to the Military Command Control Center in Maiduguri. The directive is already complied with, as they are expected to strategize on how to bring the senseless killings in the area to an end. What is going on in the northeast? What is the response of the people and consequences of the lingering insurgent attacks? What has changed in the character of the conflict? These are questions to be answered on Good Morning Nigeria shortly.
All right, Timothy Yusuf, thank you very much there for that background. We are being joined now by guests with us here in the Abuja studios as well as from remote locations. First, would like to welcome to the studios Director of Defense Information, that's Major General John Eneche. General Eneche, a pleasure to have you on the program this morning.
Thank you.
Okay. And then we also have with us here Kabir Adamu, of course, it's a security risk management expert. It's a pleasure to have you join us again on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you.
Okay. And then joining us via Skype from the UK is another guest. It's a security analyst and counter-terrorism expert, Mr. David Otto. Mr. Otto, a pleasure that you are with us on the program. All right, blessing. Of course, we have the three guests. We will be joined subsequently by another guest from our Lagos Network studios once that clears up. But basically, General Eneche, who is the Director of Defense Information, of course, you've had a very busy schedule in the last couple of days. In particular, we know that you just returned from the epicenter of the counter-terrorism operations in the northeast, Operation Lafia Dole, where you were in Meduguri, where we also saw you. But give us a sense of precisely what is happening, because there are accounts and reports of sporadic attacks by Boko Haram, and unfortunately as well, a climb in the casualty figures.
Thank you very much. It's a good thing that we went to Meduguri, the epicenter. When we went there, we got quite detailed briefing from the theater commander, and then from the air component commander, and other subordinate commanders on the ground, in addition to the intelligence reports and situation reports that we get at the defense headquarters. And what I can tell you is that, of a truth, there are conflicting reports, like you said and rightly asserted. And then we found out that there is some kind of communication gap between the link, or the links rather, that are supposed to churn out this communication, particularly the strategic communication to the target audiences, which includes Nigerians, the general public, and even also to our own colleagues out there who are not in the theater. And what we did was to see how we can harmonize and then mend defenses, so that once the information comes out, that is the after-action reports, after-action information, it is exact. And like I did explain before we traveled to Meduguri, particularly the one that actually brought the confusion or the doubts in the minds of so many people of the last major incident that involved the explorers from the University of Meduguri. It was the issue of the death, the demise of the mission commander. That is a field mission commander. That was the officer that went with them. He is actually supposed to get us the contact report, follow it up with the situation report, probably some hours later, and then the after-action report. It is after the after-action report is processed and confirmed that you now give out the real situation, which is at most times 99% correct, which was not done. And that was what happened. And I believe that was what triggered this issue of people getting reports here and there. And then secondly, I must be candid and tell you that our reporters, particularly the non-professional ones, they get reports from all other sources, eyewitnesses, who are not people that are at the scene of the incidents, and they just carry it as sacrosanct and carry it as authentic reports, which is not supposed to be. That is, we have now sensitized the media center there to also try and educate them, because at the defense headquarters here we did that. We organized a defense correspondence seminar on how to monitor defense reporting. they don't know it. Majority of them, I discovered that over 80% of the reporters that are there are just out there to get news, to make news, and to make their papers and news sell. That also we have handled. And I believe that hereafter or thereafter, the meeting of Tuesday will begin to get more coordinated and close to exact reports from the Northeast zone. Thank you.
All right, John Raineche, thank you very much. Blessing, we have another guest from Lagos.
Exactly, yes. Kingsley. We'd like to welcome to the program Captain Aliu Umar, a security expert. Captain Aliu, it's good to have you join us again on the program. Good morning, Nigeria. Okay, Captain Aliu, welcome. But let's get back to the other guests we had earlier introduced. Kabir Adamu, you just returned from Maiduguri as well, and I'm sure apart from the conflicting reports and some other information out there in the public domain, you were on a reconnaissance mission as well to take a look at what is happening. It would appear after the December euphoria of having decimated or degraded Boko Haram that this remnants have actually found some new sanctuaries. What exactly is your finding?
I would like to hammer on one element, which is the psychological resilience of the population, both in Borno and then Nigeria as a whole, as well as the Lake Chad region that is affected by the activities of the two groups, Jamaat al-Ahlissin and Dawat al-Jihad, otherwise called Boko Haram, and then the second one, Wilayat al-Sudan al-Gharb, or Islamic State in West Africa province. Unfortunately, I think the strategic communication component mentioned by General has not addressed that aspect. The moment a high-profile attack happens, everybody, starting from the media, puts pressure on the military, and which is exactly what the terrorists want. So inadvertently, we're actually helping the terrorists achieve their aim. That, for me, was one of the #1 discoveries from the recent visit. The population in Borno, unfortunately, has been affected psychologically by this new surge. Nigeria as a whole has been affected psychologically, and we're failing in that regard. I'm not putting this blame on the shoulder of the military. I believe it's a policy by the Nigerian government. The counter-terrorism strategy should have addressed that ab initio, and I think going forward, this is an area that we need to address significantly if we're going to see any progress in this war. Winning the hearts and minds of the people perhaps is the beginning of winning this war. I have heard statements by the general where he pleaded with residents of Borno to support the military. Now, the only way they will do that is if you win their heart and mind. So that component of the CVE approach, countering violent extremism, the component of strategic communication, where you build the psychological resilience of Nigerians, the people of Borno, to now support what you are doing, I think we need to give it more. And in this regard, I would call on especially the Office of the National Security Advisor, the coordinator on counter-terrorism. I think the military and as an institution should be insulated from these political elements. It's a well-respected institution. We need it, and it must survive. So we should insulate it from politics. And then that office, which, as you know, is an appointee, should handle that component. And we need to see more of that going forward.
All right, Kabir Adamu, I mean, you've raised a very pertinent aspect, but is the suggestion that Boko Haram insurgents are doing this to rattle the military, to destabilize the population, or otherwise that they are regaining strength? I mean, is it both of them from what you know so far?
Yeah. The two groups that I mentioned, the Islamic State in West Africa province and Boko Haram, they are divided in terms of the method and the strategy with which they want to achieve their objective. Let's not kid ourselves. The objective is the same. They want to establish a caliphate. But how are they going about trying to achieve that? Now, they have been decimated, like the military mentioned. There is no doubt about that. They are not holding on to any territory. However, how do they remain within the forefront of discourse is by carrying out these asymmetric attacks, unfortunately on vulnerable targets. And I'm happy that the military has mentioned these vulnerabilities, so we don't need to emphasize that point. The easiest way that they can remain in the forefront of our national discourse is by attacking high-profile target. And unfortunately, in the case of the exploration team, we delivered that high-profile target to them. We can talk about the integrity of the security program around that exploration team. We can discuss the failures of that security program, but the truth of it is we delivered that target to them. They took advantage of it. So the number one question is, what are we doing about the several other vulnerable targets that are of high profile? And then how do you make sure that even when such vulnerabilities are exploited, that Nigerians as a whole are behind the military and behind the government? This is the point I'm trying to bring forward.
All right. Thanks. Blessing, go ahead. Yeah.
All right. We also introduced David Otto, joining us via Skype, security analyst and counter-terrorism expert. Okay, Mr. Otto, yes, these recent attacks, having listened to both the General as well as Kabir Adamu here in the studio, this latest attacks are certainly not new as into military strategies. What exactly are we up against in this resurgence?
Thank you for having me. I think, these attacks, which you've rightly mentioned, have not been something very new. Boko Haram is an organization that has been running a riot, since about 15 years now. And they've continued, to carry out this type of attacks, against civilian, soft and hard targets, and we've seen, after the military had said, they have technically defeated Boko Haram, and they had actually taken them out of ground zero, which is the Sambisa forest. But recently Boko Haram has re-emerged, as the Air Force actually acknowledged that they have actually witnessed remnants of Boko Haram members, in Sambisa forest. And I think it's important that the military does not actually believe that they can actually take this war against Boko Haram on their own. This is a multi-level and multi-approach strategy which the Nigerian government needs to have. The military does not have the type of training. We've always said this time and again, that the military does not have the type of training to fight an asymmetric warfare, which is what Boko Haram is doing. The military is used to fighting conventional warfare, and the Nigerian army is trained, to fight conventional warfare. So what we continuously say is that, there has to be a training of the local people who are affected. I know we have the Civilian Joint Task Force, which actually provides a lot of intelligence that the military uses in order for them to counter Boko Haram. But I think, we have to take it further, because as the gentleman rightly mentioned, there's a huge gap in terms of strategic communication, but not just strategic communication at the level of reporting what has been done, but also strategic communication in terms of giving people awareness. There are lots of areas in which you cannot actually go to, about 2 kilometers away from Maiduguri. It is not safe. The people within the northern part of Borno who live in those in the northern villages close to the borders of Cameroon, Niger, and Chad, those individuals in those areas where Boko Haram mainly recruits do not actually get the information that the military or the government passes through, because they do not have those kind of facilities. So strategic communication comes in very different levels. At the level of awareness, where people have to understand that they do not have to fall prey to the recruitment strategy of Boko Haram. At the level of giving information to the public. So there are so many levels where the government has been failing in terms of this approach to the Boko Haram crisis. So I think it is not just looking at the role of the military alone. We have to look at different roles. What kind of role are the people playing? And for example, I can tell you for sure that people like the acting president or the former President Buhari, they've not been to all these areas where they are sending the military to. So it's very difficult for you to give the military morale when you yourself as the leader, you have an insurgency in your own country, but you've not been able to go to all these communities, to assure them and reassure them of your security. And the lack of assurance and reassurance is one of the reasons why, the NNPC members from the University of Maiduguri were captured by Boko Haram, because they were promised security, but this security actually failed. So there are multiple levels where, the military and the government of Nigeria has to work on it in order for them to be able to defeat Boko Haram. But just by saying they've defeated Boko Haram militarily, it's not enough.
David Otto, thank you very much. Just to add to what you just said, yes, President Buhari has been indisposed, but you are aware that the acting president, Yemi Osinbajo, has actually visited Borno State. It's also visited some of the areas and had interactions with the troops and officers, together, of course, with the high command of the military. Now, let's go to our Lagos Network studios and bring in Captain Aliu Umar into our conversation, the regular face on Good Morning Nigeria, but we understand that there is some connection problem that we're having with our Lagos Network studios. Is Lagos all right now? If it's okay, then we go over there.
Yes, that's...
Okay, now we understand that there are some technical glitches. You saw Captain Umar on the screen a moment ago, but once that clears up, obviously we will return. Now just to again ask the General, that's the Director Defense Information, you know, part of what it's been reported, I'm sure you have seen this, there's also been a reaction to it. There was a report by a Bureau of Counterterrorism in the U.S., a unit under the Department, under State Department, claiming that part of what we are seeing now is as a result of, according to that report, the inability of the Nigerian military to hold recovered territories from the insurgents. What's your reaction to this?
I will again state here that that report, in all fairness to the committee that does that job, they did it, or they are supposed to do it in good faith, in the interests of the whole world, which is what they are out for. But again, after the report came out, I went through the whole contents of the report, a 19-page document. And the report is not only on Nigeria, but on the countries of the Lake Chad Basin region. Nigeria was covered from pages 1 to 7. And again, I have my little doubts, with all sense of purpose, about the overview, which was done about the content of the report. This report is meant actually for the Congress of the United States, to enable them to take decisions on how to assist in countering global terrorism. Very objective, aim. Now, I want to bring out the sentence, the particular sentence that has brought all these doubts, which is contrary to the main body of the report. I'm sorry to bring that out.
No, please go ahead.
Now,
I'm sorry about that.
The report, the sentence is, the Nigerian military was, mark it was in the past, unable to hold and rebuild, mark rebuild, civilian structures and institutions in those areas it had cleared. When you look at this sentence, what, like our guest from the UK stated, what is the task of the military in every conflict? Is the task of the military to rebuild civilian structures and institutions in those areas cleared, or the task of the military is to clear? Going by the strategy of the Chief of Army Staff and the Nigerian Army in this context, which was made clear to the whole world, and that is the way it is, was to decimate, dominate, and then occupy. That strategy is still on course. This is the domination stage. Now, I want to tell you that the whole effort of any counter-insurgency and terrorism is a multi-sectoral affair. And I want to state here specifically and categorically that the job of rebuilding civilian structures and institutions is not particularly for the military and for the army. But being that as it may, I want to also point out to the general public that the army in particular, using its army engineers, I was on ground. I fought in that place 20 years ago, when what is happening there now was not captioned as insurgency or terrorism. And within this period, even when they say was, the report was meant for 2016 and not for what the people are now raising all over the media for January to July 2017. I'm coming to a point. That the Nigerian army has been involved in rebuilding roads and then other what do you call it, quick impact projects by the Nigerian Air Force to win the hearts and minds of people. They did not talk about that, the misinformers. They did not talk about all this. How have we been able to move? Do people fly by air to connect from Damboa to Maiduguri, from Bama to Maiduguri, or from Maiduguri to Mongono, where roads were created before 2015 and after 2015 up to December 2016? The misinformers of this report did not come out with that. They distorted this report, all in an aim, grand design, to do what? To pitch the Nigerian military against the United States government. Now, in the same report, just like I stated earlier on, that it is not in consonance with the overview. In page 5 of the 7 pages that covered Nigeria, because all the other pages covered Niger, Chad, and Cameroon, the same report, unknown to them, appraised and then commended highly Nigerian government and its agencies. And I quote, "The Nigerian government actively cooperated with the United States and other international partners to prevent further acts of terrorism in Nigeria against U.S. citizens, citizens of third countries, and Nigerian citizens." Could this have been possible without the involvement of the Nigerian Armed Forces and the Nigerian Army? Obviously, no. So what I stand to state here is that this report is with an ulterior motive and to misinform Nigerians. And again, secondly, that we have high-level collaborators in every sector in this whole affair. Now, let me bring out something. This is by way of information that I got, being on the ground, that it will surprise some people to know that people even donate their children to go on suicide missions. Children, girls, we have confirmed that from interrogation. They are still alive. My father asked me to, sent me to go as a contribution to the whole of the effort, right inside Maiduguri. So that is why it is not easy as we are analyzing it, or people will come and analyze that. It's not as simple as that. But I believe with what the measures we have put in place, and then the encouragement that however highly placed any person is, whether a cleric or non-cleric, they should be reported and they will be investigated. So my reaction to this report is that it was done with ulterior motive. And when you go through the content of it, it was with the objective of drawing government attention to areas that they need to make improvement. The government of Nigeria, the government of Niger, the government of Chad, and the government of Cameroon. That is what the report is set out to do for the year that just passed, not for the current year. And in that year, they commended Nigerian effort from the way I saw in this report on page 5. Thank you very much.
All right. General Enenche, I mean, you've raised very important points in responding to the report by the Bureau for Counterterrorism, which is a unit of the State Department in the U.S. But let's take a look at the efforts at holding and then rebuilding civilian structures, so-called civilian structures, as I said. We had seen, in the aftermath of the declaration of the defeat or decimation of Boko Haram, a gradual move of the police, police officers, as well as rehabilitation workers and all of that. Is that effort continuing?
Yes.
Yes.
I will state that that effort is continuing, and that is the normal procedure, which will bring out what the misinformers wanted to portray the Nigerian military as not doing. The people that hold ground after a capture, after a defeat, after, let me use a normal parlance that people, after you drive out insurgents and terrorists from a place, normally are civil authorities, and they comprise of the police. In our own case, we have the National Security and Civil Defense Corps, the law courts, and all other civil organizations. And as I speak to you, they have been doing that gradually, within available human resources and then other resources like equipment. For the police, I would particularly state that in Maiduguri, to a large extent, they have a stronghold. National Security and Civil Defense Corps, they have a stronghold, the immigration and other paramilitary, and that is on. But because of ulterior motive, they refuse to look at that aspect. I must commend that effort. and also other civil organizations they are setting up. In short, in particular, I must commend the effort of the Borno state government, Yobe state government, and then the Adamawa state governments. They have built so many structures, including civil structures, just like roads and then bridges that were damaged. In addition to that, so that is on, I can confirm to you.
All right, General Enche, thank you very much. We earlier introduced Captain Umar in Lagos. I'm sure we can actually get through to him now. Captain Umar Aliu, if you can hear me, the question, you having listened to the guest here as well as in the UK, would like to apologize. The first instance, couldn't get to you in good time. Apologies, we hope you accept that. Now, the resurgence is giving another sense of concern and set of worries, both for the populace around the northeast as well as the military, and perhaps even the international body. What does this resurgence bring on for us? What new areas of conflict do we need to start watching out for?
If you have observed the trend of events in the northeast from January 1st to last count, last day in July, we saw some 38 attacks and over 180 deaths. And these attacks had a frequency of max 4 days interval, minimum 2 to 1 day interval. Let's accept the general assumption that they have been decimated, true. But given what we have seen, if you do a trend analysis, you will agree with me that the frequency of attacks from January to date shows that something is gradually coming back together. From information available to me and our little computations from our sideline, I can confidently tell you that the loopholes that are availed them are largely coming from leakages that are informed by what I want to call a non-robust blueprint for handing over cleared areas from military authorities to constituted civil authority. Looked at another way, what I'm trying to say is, what, for example, is the immigration blueprint for counter-terrorism? What, for example, is the Nigerian police force blueprint for counter-terrorism? The moment these restructured areas or cleared areas are handed over, the military cannot do everything. I draw this from the fact that I was on an interministerial tour of the entire Northeast last March. And part of what I believe and we recommended was there must be a blueprint. The Nigerian police, the SSS, the immigration, the Civil Defense Corps, at the very least in Borno State, should be in anti- or counter-terrorism mode now. They cannot go back there with the same old rules and the same old norms. Coming to the army itself has its limitations. If we really want to take possession of Maiduguri firmly and deny movement particularly, we must begin to look at upgrading the air content of the northeastern operations. The land army content is okay, it's satisfactory, but there is one serious deficiency: surveillance, aerial surveillance. Good enough Maiduguri Sahel Savannah. With the right amount of aerial surveillance, you can deny easy movement to these insurgents, particularly when they carry out the attacks the way they have done across board in the last few months since January. Coming to suicide bombers. Suicide bombers are still predominantly girls, and they go into places like University of Maiduguri to actually detonate their bombs. It is key that security awareness for the populace is not the way forward. I have always wondered why anyone will tell people to be security aware. Security awareness is not an act, it's a state of mind. And when you know your security threats, then awareness dawns on you naturally. For the governors, I want to say kudos, but they have their limitations. Terrorism, or rather counter-terrorism, is one big party. One big party that brings in a lot of participants and stakeholders. The governors are doing their bit, particularly Governor Kashim. The army is doing its bits. But then what about the others? The musician is there, the caterer is there, the dancers are there. But what about the compare? We need other hands, other specialist groups to come in. It's not about guns and bullets alone. The Safe Corridor is also doing well. But then you must understand that no matter how decimated they are, if the head is still off radar, then it's a matter of time before they grow. So where is the head of the insurgency group? Other than that, coming back to this issue of security threat awareness, we must be able to begin to tell these people in as many languages as they speak the things they do that actually result to their own undoing. When it comes to security threat awareness index, not only in Borno State, in Nigeria, it's almost zero. People shake hands with death, they live with death, they even provoke the unexpected, not because they want to, but because they just don't know. And so when you tell them security consciousness, security awareness, they just look at you and go back home and do the same things they've been doing and get the same results regardless how you try to help with physical or technical or electronic security measures. That is what the insurgents exploit. Security threat awareness is key. People must be told those things they do or those things they resist. The responsibility act of it. Yes, you have the right to refuse what you want. We're in a democracy. You have a right not to do what you won't do. But then where there are rights, there must be responsibility. So if you claim rights, you should also accept responsibility when certain things happen. I see too many times people blaming, but then the people you are blaming have limitations. They are not perfect, yes. But if limitations are actually taken off them by empowering over other groups, then we're going to see a steady progress in the present situation in the Northeast. If I were to round this up, I can tell you confidently from my database that the group is growing back. Not maybe in size, but in act. From the details we have, it's not easy to plan one operation. When you attain 2-day frequency interval, then something is adding back up, logistics-wise, finance-wise, and what have you.
All right, well, Captain Umar, Ali Umar, thank you very much. That's one of the issues you just touched on now. But just before, again, we come back to the other guests, let's back up a bit. There was always the caution that, all right, whether technically defeated, decimated, routed, and extirpated from ground zero in Sambisa, there was always the risk of the insurgents regrouping or disappearing into the civil population, regrouping at some point, and then relaunching their attacks, such as we have seen with the frequency of attacks in recent times. Is it that we tended to have relaxed a bit too quickly, or that we didn't quite factor in some of the elements that you've just touched on? That's one. Second, has weather got anything to do with what's going on?
Your first question, aptly, it's in our nature, okay, to rest on our hours as time elapses. If you want to understand that properly, take a look around you, Nigeria generally, and try to relate our maintenance culture quotient with other things, less combat. So it's not surprising that we may have gotten it, and as time elapses, the farther we are from the day we got it right, you're going to see some kind of relapse, if I could call it that. Sign of that relapse could also be gleaned off the frequency of attacks. So one man's loss becomes the other man's gain. You spoke about the weather. I do not want to see the weather as the problem. I get excited when people talk about the weather, particularly in the Northeast. Yes, the weather itself and its challenges is opportunity for us to grow. I'm living to see that day when Nigeria will have her own Desert Research Institute. And if there is one, I'm living to see that day when it will be more visible on the counter or anti-terrorism blueprint. Yes, of course, the weather will always be an issue in combat situations. But on 2017 Earth, I refuse to accept that the weather can be a limitation per se. We have equipments that can see through weather. We have crafts that can go through weather. So in fact, let me tell you something with all due respect. Manually, I know militants who battle the weather and do what they want to do in the creeks. They don't have all the equipments that probably our Navy will say we do not have, so we cannot navigate. And don't forget, whether or no weather, all the sophisticated weapons we talk about are just imitations of the human sense. From your camera to your infrared, all these things were ideas that were turned technical from prompts of the human being himself. So what exactly am I trying to say here? Borno State, as far as weather is concerned, is an opportunity for us to now exercise our imagination and intellect to come up with solutions. If we lack the resources to do that, which I doubt, then I am sure that we will, of course, have the finances to buy them. So weather cannot be but an excuse. There is no problem with the weather. The weather will be what it is, but we will achieve what we must.
All right, thank you very much, Captain Ali Umar. We'll come back to you in the course of the discussion as well. Let's go over to David Otto, joining us via Skype. Now, you talked earlier about the kind of strategies being used of late, or what ought to be. Earlier we talked about the asymmetrical warfare versus conventional warfare. Now, having listened to both Captain Aliu in Lagos as well as General here and Kabiru Adamu. Now, what exactly do we see as a relapse in what has been done in the past, whatever collaboration effort, and what needs to be done differently from your own point of view?
I think what is important, as my colleagues have said, is that we have to understand the particular dynamics of the way Boko Haram operates, and we are aware that Boko Haram uses different tactics, which sometimes they use ambush tactics, which the military is quite aware of, and because they've become so disorganized, it becomes very difficult for the military to predict what kind of tactics Boko Haram would use, what time Boko Haram will use that tactics, and against what kind of targets that they'll use those tactics. I mean, what is important is for the military to be able to gather intelligence, within the communities that Boko Haram lives in. We've always said that a terrorist organization cannot survive without the communities that they live in. Boko Haram strives because it's got support from the communities, whether you like it or not. So I think what is important is that the army or the military or the Air Force or the civilian JTF or the police that operates within these areas have to devise a means of getting intelligence from the communities. But I think that kind of cohesion does not exist. The communities do not trust that they can be protected, by the military. And therefore, because they have more fear against the Boko Haram insurgency, they choose, to go on the side of Boko Haram, which is very dangerous. So what I think is, needs to be done at the moment is that, we have to be able to build community-based intelligence where people would be very, very free and people will feel comfortable to give information directly to the police and information to the army. But at the moment, that may never happen because, we have these areas where Boko Haram operates, which is completely ungoverned. which means people do not really feel that they belong to Nigeria. People don't feel that, they have the backing of the government. So it becomes very difficult for them to come forward with information. Most of the information that the military has used, for the past 3 or 4 years has been thanks to the civilian JTF, which, has been able to penetrate the communities because they have a pre-existing relationship with the communities. We know that the Americans, the Brits, have assisted Nigeria in terms of gathering air surveillance, intelligence, and reconnaissance. But the Americans, they themselves are not good in this kind of strategy, because if they were good enough, then they wouldn't be having problems, in Iraq, in Syria, in Yemen, and Libya. So I think, instead of the Americans, to come and say they want to train the Nigerians on how to tackle Boko Haram, I think the Nigerians should be the ones, training America on how to tackle insurgency, because the insurgency is in the land of the Nigerians. It's in the land of the Lake Chad region of Cameroon, Niger, and Chad. These are the people who have to be going to America and training the Americans on how to tackle local insurgencies, not the other way around. And that is why I would step a little bit into the American report. I don't think, it is America has any moral obligation to write about, what is happening in Nigeria. But the reason why they do that is because, we ourselves in Nigeria, we've not been able to come out with honest reports about the situation on the ground. And when you don't come out with an honest report, somebody else will come out with the report, which you cannot refuse. So I think it is the obligation, it is the duty of the Nigerian government, of the Nigerian military, to make sure that they come out with an honest report on what is happening on ground in terms of their tactics in tackling the insurgency. Once they do that, then the Americans will not have, an obligation to come out with this report, which, of course, as the general says, is only for the favor of the American strategy. So I think it's important that we need to have a combination of an anti-terrorism strategy that works hand in hand with a counter-terrorism strategy. And then, we need to have a strategy that works together with how we protect and how we react, to insurgency attacks. So I think, once we don't have that kind of a comprehensive strategy where information is shared between each and every unit consistently, then we will not be able to defeat Boko Haram. And of course, we have the issue of the collaboration with regional states like Cameroon, Niger, Chad. This does not happen because each and every country is trying to play God. And without the really neat collaboration, I know we have the multinational joint task force, but even though we have the multinational joint task force, the sharing of information is still one of the biggest problems that we have in terms of tackling Boko Haram, and that needs to stop.
David Otto, thank you very much again. We'll come back to you. Now, so you're all aware, last week, the acting president, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, directed the service chiefs to relocate, as it were, almost immediately to the Central Command Center, the epicenter of the counter-terrorism effort in Maiduguri, that's somewhere in the northeast. And since then, of course, we have seen video clips of the service chiefs, the chief of defense staff, head of the army, the Air Force, and then other related officers and the activities of what they're doing. But in particular, the chief of army staff himself has been speaking on what it's been done and what should be done as he monitors the operations on the front line. Let's now listen to some of the excerpts of what he said, and thereafter we'll go on a short break, and when we come back, we continue the conversation.
No time for us to rest. What the terrorists will continue to do is to attack isolated locations and then take some areas that are isolated or very, very vulnerable places to embarrass everybody. This, we must stop it and ensure that we continue to push them out and clear them accordingly.
All right. Now, part of the information that is available is to the effect that the Chief of Army Staff has been engaging traditional authorities in the Northeast, seeking to build greater confidence in terms of also seeking to gather reliable, effective information to assist in the counter-terrorism effort. That's one of the issues that Blessing, of course, David Otto was referring to, you know, more up-to-date strategic information gathering. That's intelligence gathering, intelligence sharing, the local community to the military operatives. Kabir, what's your take on this? Are we seeing, you know, now a switch or a change in the appropriate strategy with regard to gathering real-time intelligence to deal with these attacks? Because, as some persons have said, look, and then Captain Ali also referred to that, if you're having attacks occurring on the intervals of 2 days, 3 or 4 days, it means that, you know, the attackers are very well equipped. So how do you stop them in their tracks, you know, before they come out with the next attack? Kabir.
Yeah, as far as I know, we have about 6 to 7 government departments that are responsible for intelligence in Nigeria. When I speak, I'm not speaking maybe not necessarily about the military, but all the other departments. Now, how do we have any of these departments that have attempted to infiltrate the two groups, for instance? Do we have any of these departments that understands the ideology of these groups, that understands the method and the strategy of these groups, that are attempted to infiltrate the line along these methods? Let's pick one of these methods as an example, bombs that are being manufactured, you know, the improvised explosive devices, the materials that are used for putting together these bombs. Which department in government has attempted to decipher these bombs and then from point A to point B infiltrate where, as an example, fertilizer. I know the Office of the National Security Advisor had attempted to restrict the circulation of you know, fertilizer, mainly because one of the major raw materials that are being used to put together these bombs. But how do we put together this information? How do we come up with an intelligence? This is, I think, the component that the various speakers have spoken about. And we need to see a blueprint, a strategy by government in line with the kind of directive that the acting president has given to the service chiefs. We need to see that kind of directive to all of these 6 departments regarding the strategy and the methods of this group. As an example, what would stop us, for instance, from giving, let's say, the DSS the directive and say, tell me in 2 weeks where the leader of Jamaat al-Sunnah al-Dawati wal-Jihad is. That's a directive, a tasking for intelligence to be built. I am sorry to say the concentration right now, unfortunately, on politics. And we need to remove the leadership of these organizations from the political element that has permeated their operations. In other countries, for instance, the US that we're talking about, we've seen how the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security has played critical role of recent in safeguarding the national interest. Now, we need to insulate the leadership of these organizations from politics so that their attention is now moved to the protection and the projection of our national interest. That is when we'll see real intelligence and real sharing of intelligence. To speak about the communities in particular, like you said, I've just returned from Maiduguri, and I'm not too comfortable with the reaction I've seen from the local populace. A lot of the components of the local populace are not in tune with some of the discussions we're having here, mainly because their interest, their rights are not being met by the government, quote and unquote. They see the military, they see the government as projecting another interest. Unfortunately, that is not theirs. I know this may sound a bit difficult for people to understand.
Yeah, so break it down,
to appreciate. I'll give you an example. Let's take Mobar as an example. A military operation is going on in Mobar, and a directive is given for the villages around Mobar to move out from those villages and concentrate in Mobar to allow the military carry out its operation. A fine strategy, no doubt. But have we asked the question, those populations in the villages that we've asked to move, who caters for them? Who provides for them to move from that village where we've told them to move to another location? Who gives them the shelter to stay? What of their food produce that they've put in barns for this period to use? Who protects it?
That isn't the responsibility of the military.
I agree. That's why at the beginning of this discussion I said I'm not putting this on the shoulder of the military.
Yes.
The military is doing its campaign. But frankly, the other government department needs to come up. Right now, we put the shoulder on the hands of the humanitarian community. So the military calls in the humanitarian community, the international NGOs, and asks them to cater for this population. But I'm bringing out one point here. How do you expect that same person that you've done this to now provide information to? He's not going to do it. Firstly, he's unhappy that you've made him leave from his community. His food produce that he's put in barns would come and be taken away, either bombed by the military or taken by the insurgents. So for me, these are issues that the Nigerian government, not just the military as it were, needs to put into consideration. The only way you can win the hands and minds of the people is by listening to them, understanding their problems and addressing those problems, building trust and confidence in the people. And that's where I think the political class needs to come in.
Are these collaborative efforts not to want, given the lapses, to actually give the sympathy or fear to hand over to the insurgent to actually be emboldened?
I agree, totally. They exploit these vulnerabilities. A villager in one remote part of Borno will ask himself the question: is it the military that's going to protect me, or unfortunately is it these other two classes of insurgents that would either I keep quiet about their operations or I collaborate with them? And most times, unfortunately, either willingly or unwillingly, he's going to do the other, because remember, survival is an instinct. You would want to survive one way or the other. So I think these are areas that we need to look into if we need to win the hearts and minds of the people. The military is doing a wonderful job, no doubt about it. But the Nigerian government, as a whole, we need to support the military.
Unfortunately, I mean, Kabir, that's the humanitarian intervention where there appears to be a lag from what you're saying. And there have been reports, excuse me, reports in the past of even humanitarian relief, being purloined by persons who were charged with them. Blessing, I'm sure you remember some of those reports. But that was the point that General Eneche raised. Is that related to what you just said now? General Eneche said that on interrogation, to the extent that, of course, he can disclose that information, that he had found that some of the potential suicide bombers were actually donated by their parents and asked to say, look, this is part of our effort, go ahead and do this. What underpins that disposition?
Firstly, the two groups, they exploit psychological, economic, to an extent social, as well as religious elements for recruitment. And then the last one is, of course, forceful conscription of the members of society they're targeting. So that's just one element that the general has mentioned, and we know it's happening. But for me, the most important thing is how do you prevent it from happening? That's where the element of counter-radicalization and de-radicalization come in. I'm sure at a point we'll probably speak about countering violent extremism, but those are two elements that need to be brought in. You need to take that away from the two terrorist groups, and then they won't be able to recruit anymore. But for as long as we allow them to use those four elements that I mentioned, then they will continue recruiting, and that's why the war will continue, unfortunately.
All right, Malam Kabir, thank you very much, General, as well as Captain Alu in Lagos and David also in UK. We have reactions coming by way of tweets from our viewers. We'd like to go through them, and then we will come back to the questions for you. From Aliu Hadi, we have this, there is a hidden agenda beneath the ground that some people are making money out of insurgency.
And we have this tweet from Cecilia Okoroma: Nigerian army and the entire military should be highly commended for the pains and sacrifices made for the sake of all Nigerians.
Festus Akimbayo has this tweet: Boko Haram ambush of an oil exploration team shows there is an enemy within in the Nigeria's military. The military should purge itself of this enemy within. Again, Cecilia Okoroma: the NUJ should sensitize their members on the need for investigative journalism and sanction those who dish out false news. From Abubakar Umar, Issa is this tweet: hunters are the solution to the isolated attacks. They should be allowed to enter Borno State forests. Badamasi H. Adamo: the military should borrow from the U.S. 4 pillars of countering terrorism, which are destroy, deny, diminish, and defend. Sani Michael Omakoji has this tweet: General Eneche, recently some police on escort were attacked and kidnapped by Boko Haram. What is the hope of a common Nigerian like me? And then we have this from Hassan Labran. It says Boko Haram, that says surrenders in large numbers to the military as one of their diversionary tactics to have the upper hand. Prince Kajetan, the battle against insurgency should not be left in the hands of military alone. Common civilians have a lot to contribute.
And Comrade Tomori Abdul, not until we fish out the saboteurs, both in the military and the government, even there are saboteurs within BBOJ, the solution to Boko Haram may remain elusive.
Another one from Sani Michael Amakoji, the fight against these elements should start from our porous borders. Who and from where are they getting these arms from?
Shitu, let's change the progress. Chloe, we don't get the narratives of these wars right. With rainy season, Boko Haram revs up attacks because they have shield of bushes and shrubs.
Festus Akinbeye has another tweet. Nigerians should not leave the tackling of Boko Haram to government alone. Nigerians should be involved by giving information to military about Boko Haram and their sponsors.
All right, now those are some of the tweets that we are taking at the meantime. Let's return to Lagos. Captain Ali Umar, number of issues on the table back again based on the comments made by the other guests. What is your take on all of this? Add to that, whatever you might say, the issue with regard to financing. It appears that the Nigerian authorities have not been able to plug the access to resources by the terrorists. Otherwise, how would they procure the elements or the materials that they are procuring for whatever they are doing in addition to their weaponry?
Yeah, basically the responses to the program, as I had been read out, are coming from people, and that shows you that people are actually seeing the insurgency situation from different perspectives. And that goes to inform exactly what I said earlier, that it's one big party and there are so many skill sets required. Let me put it this way, the results we seek to manifest or seek to achieve in the Northeast are cumbersome. They are cumbersome because they come from different perspective genres. But then there is a fast track to getting the results we seek. And that fast track, if you like, is psychological or psychosocial. Let me relate with what Kabir said about someone who actually will donate his own child to be a suicide bomber. Is not different from the one who will participate in honor killing because one thing or the other in his tradition or in his mind's blueprint says so. Where I'm trying to get now is a bit intellectual, and you need your imagination intact to understand me. Anything you see happening that is perpetuated by humans is humanly possible, be it a taboo, an abomination, whatever you see. And now, a certain school of thought, security-wise, goes into the study of this human mind. You see, we look at results and tend to forget what makes up results. Results are actually collective action. Action brings about result. What brings about action? Action actually brings about what you can call perception. Okay, perception is what informs your action, and then your action gives the result. And then what brings about perception? Your perception is actually a sum total of your thoughts on any subjects at all. And now what adds up to thoughts? Your thoughts, the seat of the thoughts you have is your mind. But what adds up to thoughts is actually experiences. So if you wanted to tamper with results positively or negatively, you got to tamper with the source, mind. The terrorists are honing their skills in what we call mind control. Government do not seem to be doing that. Neither do the armed forces. In more formal circles, you can call it propaganda. The insurgents, the secessionists in the Southeast, they are all masters of mind control. And unfortunately, we have so much fallow minds
given the dysfunctionalities of our religious, educational, and what have you institutions. And when the mind is fallow, whatever drops in there just grows, whether it's weed or it's crop. So initially I said you need your intellect and your imagination to fight this war against terrorism. It's not about guns, boats, and weapons alone. It's a big party. That's my take on the responses. Going further, I want to also add that when we are talking about insurgency in the Northeast, we have to understand that the results we want to see, just like I've spoken about mind, is applicable to all. What is the blueprint? What is the mindset of the immigration officer, customs, SSS, even to the last village man? What is their mindset? How have we taken that space? How have we dominated it? There are fast-track, low-cost, shortcut means to achieving this overnight. It was done in the past, it's still being done, and in future it's even going to get more sophisticated. So for me, when I look at the Northeast, I just see a place that is evolving much faster than our solutions are. And that is the challenge and the excitement. Can we acquire the speed to match up and even go beyond the evolution there? Time, of course, will tell.
Captain Ali Omar, security expert, thank you very much. You joined us from our Lagos studio. We appreciate your insight on the program and discussion this morning. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Right, General Nature, yes, so much has been said, and taking off from the last point, issue of the mind control and also re-strategizing for what needs to be done. Now, most of the attacks have come on the military bases, outposts, and even ambush on the military convoy, as well as some other kind of convoy being moved around in the Northeast. Now, where is this direction for the military generally in actually reorganizing the minds of your men to continue in this war?
Thank you very much. I want to state that before I answer or respond to your question directly, that the strategy of the army in particular is still on course. That is the domination phase. Once there is a decimation, I want the general public to understand, whether in conventional warfare, asymmetrical warfare, or normal internal insurrection, that is what you see. Once you burst a pipe, the water will flow. Once you burst an anthill, the ants will spread all over. And it's left for you to begin to clear them. And that is what we are doing. I want the public to be conscious of that. And as you keep clearing, within time, it will be cleared. But that cannot be achieved putting all the contributions together without the general public, without the people of Borno State in particular. I must emphasize that. Otherwise, I wouldn't have come out with that information and that illustration that I gave, that somebody to contribute and donate your daughter, innocent girl, and say, go and be part of the effort for us to wipe out Western education from Borno State and the surroundings. No. It is more than we should just say it is a military effort alone or a kinetic effort alone. I want to agree with all the other speakers, and a lot of effort needs to go in. What we are doing is that we are now channeling and we are encouraging opinion leaders, the clerics in that area, traditional rulers, to come into this more than ever. I, particularly as somebody who has experienced insecurity in the Northeast, particularly in the Borno State, for about 20 years now, I fought there. It translated from one form to the other. All the other criminals, they joined the ideologies, the terrorists. And it is to radicalize them, to de-indoctrinate them. It will not be easy for the military alone to do that, but it must be a collaborative effort by all the stakeholders, and that is what we are saying. And you can see that clearly from the message of the Chief of Army Staff to the troops, where he went to visit them on this clip that you showed us, where he went to visit the emir and spoke to them. That is what we are soliciting, and that is our message. That come out and speak to the people. The thing is deeply rooted for over 20 years, and with that, before you know
okay, General, we must go now.
The clearance.
Thank you very much. Okay, David, Otto, just your last thoughts on this. Let's we must go now. David?
That whatever the case, the key issue here is that, we have to be able to understand that, people become insurgents because of the vulnerabilities which they face within their communities. And even if you do an awareness program about the way these groups recruit individuals, if you do not address those vulnerabilities, people would not still refrain from being radicalized by insurgents. So I think, the strategy has to be comprehensive, and the strategy has to be long, in the sense that, we have to ensure that, we have, the multi-agencies, that's the social services, the people that provide facilities for young, vulnerable people within those communities, are existing. So we have to build those capacities. And it takes a very long time to build those capacities. It is not something which can be done in a very, very short time. So I think the focus, of the Nigerian government, either has to be to build those capacities, which takes a long time, or to approach these organizations for a dialogue. Because, if you cannot win the war, as you call it, using the military, and you cannot also provide the capacities which would stop young people from being recruited into these organizations, then your only option is to dialogue with these organizations that, of course, some of them are willing, to sit down with the government and dialogue. And we've seen that as an example of the release of the Chibok girls, which a lot of people were thinking that it would never happen. Of course.
All right, that's David Otto, a security expert, joining us via Skype from the UK. We appreciate your contribution to our discussion this morning. Once again, thanks a lot for being with us on the program. Now, let's come back to our Abuja studios and then take the tweets, that's reactions, set of tweets that we have from our viewers. Blessing.
All right, Usman Abubakar has this tweet: the security should create good relationship between them and the residents so that there will be communication exchange.
Now, Olorode in our lodge tweets. Now, some military guys need to be under surveillance. They could be leaking vital information to the enemy.
From Emmanuel Mazinye is this tweet: resurgence of Boko Haram is as a result that someone is benefiting. The army should look inside and around, use more intelligence.
Theophilus Sakoma tweets, please, Captain Aliu, why did you retire? You are very intelligent and seem young for retirement. You should be in the army engine room fighting insurgency.
From Suleiman Idris, create room for state police agents who understand their local terrains than depending on just federal police.
And then Abu Hanifa tweets, now God bless you, David Otto, for nailing it. We are only good at grammar.
Usman Abubakar again tweets, there is really need investigation committee that will check on the district heads, local government chairman, and even the governor.
All right, now those are some of the tweets that we can take. In the meantime, Kabir Adamu, of course, you hear that's a question that I raised. We've not had the opportunity of dealing with it, perhaps going forward. That's to do with the flow of finances to the terrorists, how they're able to, raise the funding, as it were now, for the IEDs that they are making. They're able to sustain themselves, and then, of course, acquire more weaponry, some of the ones they have used in the attacks on the various convoys. We hope that we have the opportunity of discussing this at some other point. Otherwise, it's our appreciation to you, Kabir Adamu. Always a delight having you. Good morning, Nigeria.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. We also would like to appreciate the Director of Defense Information, General John Eneche. General Eneche, it's a delight that you were with us on the program this morning.
Thank you very much.
Okay. All right, so that does it for our discussion segment. Let's go very quickly now to our companion segments. Then once we're ready with the companion segments, we will indicate to you, but that will be after this break.
Yes, we are all guilty of this. We judge people based on ethnic group.
My father only took a look at your picture, not picture, so, and shouted, "Hey, see this tribal mark."
We judge people based on the area they reside.
Samson comes from a place where kidnapping is rampant.
We judge people before we have a chance to know them closely.
Have you gone to Udog place to look for your dog? Unbelievable.
Stereotypes. Another rib-cracking episode of your #1 television comedy series. Professor John Bull explores and explodes this terrible societal ill. Keep a date with Professor John Bull's series and laugh like never before.
Where you come from, sir?
Come from Umeu.
Hey! Umeu!
What's up? Why the shout?
Those people sabi thief goat. Over and out.
Brought to you by Glow.
The largest data network. Glow Unlimited.
All right, let's take some sports stories now from our sports desk.
Good morning and welcome as we begin with football.
Chinese club Changchun Yatai's Odion Igalo is set to return to the Super Eagles squad ahead of the crunch clash against Cameroon after he was left out of the game against South Africa. Nigeria faced Cameroon in key back-to-back 2018 World Cup qualifiers on